Welcome to How To with NADTC, where we tackle your big challenges in small doses. On today's episode, we're going to hear from Kevin Chambers on how to adapt online tools to support the growth of human services transportation programs. Kevin Chambers is a principal at Full Path LLC in Portland, Oregon. We are excited to have Kevin join our series.
Hi there, my name's Kevin Chambers, and I'm here to talk about online tools to support the growth of human services transportation programs by adapting cloud-based productivity solutions to your organizations. Let's start off with defining a key term. What do we mean when we say the cloud? First, it's important to know that the cloud is very much a marketing term, so its meaning shifts around depending on who's doing the marketing. But generally speaking, we're talking about computing, communications, or digital storage that usually relies on computers located in data centers, which are then accessed by you, the user, via the internet, usually through an internet browser. This contrasts with on-premises computing, where the software and data is located on workstations or servers located in your facilities. Now, what are the benefits of the cloud? One of them is that your data is stored in data centers. There's a real benefit to this, to have data stored in data centers, because these facilities are designed top to bottom to protecting data in terms of physical security, protection against cyber criminals, backup power to protect against power outages, and redundant internet connections to protect against network outages. All those efforts come together to increase the likelihood that cloud-based systems will stay up and available despite a range of challenging events. Another is that you have the cloud software vendors managing the installation and constant updating of their software. They're the ones managing security updates, backups, encryption of the data, and the elements of data security that they have control over. So if a vendor offers HIPAA compliance, as both Microsoft and Google do for their core offerings, such as spreadsheets and word processing, that means they put a lot of energy into keeping your data highly secure on their end of things. Yet another benefit is that cloud software is generally designed to be highly scalable, meaning that they've designed their software to be used not by a few people, but by hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands at once. The impact of this for a growing agency is that increasing the number of users for a particular service usually means just increasing the monthly or yearly amount paid in a predictable way, and you don't need to worry that you've hit the limit of a server you own and need to buy a new one. This pay-as-you-go approach is called software as a service. Paying continually for software can seem like a bad deal if you're used to the buy-it-once model that used to be the norm. But when you consider the cost of SaaS usually includes management, support, and updates, it's often a lower total cost for the agency. Lastly, the more you are working in the cloud, the less you'll need to manage your own servers in your own back room, and the less powerful you need your workstations and laptops to be, because so much of the computing is now handled offsite in a data center. And finally, you'll get a lot easier collaboration within your organization using cloud tools. Most of the rest of this talk is dedicated to collaboration, so let's get to that. Now, we're all familiar with spreadsheets. They've been very common for decades now. They were originally designed for tracking financial data, but they can also be the perfect tool for tracking lightly structured tabular data. For example, a list of customers, a list of trips that customers want to get from your agency, or a list of vehicle maintenance events that have happened in the past or need to happen in the future. Those kinds of easy list-type data sets are perfect for tracking in spreadsheets, and that's where most people are putting them these days. Now, with the move to the cloud, we see some added benefits that just aren't possible when information is located only on your local hard drive. One is that it's much easier to share that data that you have, so you can have multiple people looking at the same live spreadsheet at the same time and editing it as well. So if you have a data set that needs to be viewed and updated frequently by multiple people, both the cloud version of Excel and Google Sheets support that. Multiple people can't edit the same cell at the same time, but they can be in different parts of the same document making changes simultaneously. This can be very handy because you get the simplicity and universal access of spreadsheets combined with the sophistication of centralized data management that would have been costly and complex just a few years ago. The other major benefit of spreadsheets in the cloud is version tracking. This addresses a couple of the primary risks of putting your data in old-style spreadsheets. That's data loss and the inability to audit changes over time. Both Excel in the cloud and Google Sheets allow you to see what changes have been made to a spreadsheet over time, by whom, and when. So if there's a data change that you look at and you're wondering, well, how did that happen? You can find that out with both those tools. That can make it a lot easier to allow data to be accessible more broadly, because with version tracking, you can loosen the reins a bit and allow data to be managed by multiple people, because the capabilities are there to track errors back to their source and readily recover data that was in a previous version. Now, to be clear, you can still have problems with spreadsheets in the cloud as you do with spreadsheets on your hard drive, in the sense that you still need to be careful about how you organize your data. The best structure may not be obvious, and you may not get it right the first time. Really, you may have to move things around a few times until it really makes sense to all users, and it's easy to use, and it's easy to get the numbers you need out of it. Also, there are a lot of practical limits to spreadsheets, even if they are well designed. So if you are tracking large quantities of data or need complex data structures with lots of different data elements and things that interrelate in a complex way, in a way that's just more than a few simple lists with a few columns, then you may need what's called a relational database, which is the kind of data storage you see in a specialized software application. So while they're great, Cloud Sheets are by no means a data tracking panacea. Now, let me give one brief example of a data tracking system that takes advantage of these features. RideSheet is a Google Sheets-based data tracking system for small, demand-responsive transportation services. It was created by my company, FullPath, with a grant from the AARP Public Policy Institute. It tracks all the essential items that you need to be tracking when you're operating a small service like that: vehicles, drivers, riders, and trip requests. RideSheet uses a behind-the-scenes programming environment provided by Google to generate driver manifests with Google Docs, calculate individual trip time and trip distances with Google Maps, and it does a few other handy things along those lines. In the piloting of RideSheet at 2 small transportation services in rural Oregon, we found that the version tracking has been a particularly beneficial feature because mistakes happen all the time, but with every error, we've been able to see where it happened, how it happened, address any training issues that need to be looked at, and reclaim any data that was lost. So it's been a great tool for that scenario. So let's move on from data and talk about text and being able to use cloud-based tools for the management of the written word. One area where the written word is important to an organization is documentation. Documentation of systems, procedures, resources, so on and so forth. Transportation services have a lot of different moving parts. There are a lot of different things that staff need to stay aligned on with regard to how things are done properly. And those procedures can change sometimes from day to day, as do the staff carrying out those procedures. So good, accessible documentation can really make the difference between an operation that is effective, efficient, and safe, and one that's not. And often it's hard to keep documentation fresh when it's on paper only. So here's where I think productivity tools in the cloud can be a real plus. You can still have your documentation in the format that you're used to, be it Word or Google Doc. But if you keep that documentation available online, then not only can you have multiple people being able to see it in its most current version at any moment, just by providing a common link to it, you can also make it very easy for people to be engaged in keeping those documents as current and accurate as possible. When you combine documentation that is online that can also manage changes, you get some really powerful outcomes. So that combination makes it possible to really sort of have the entire organization involved with and committed to maintaining that documentation and keeping it current. You can configure a document where anyone in the entire organization can make comments or inline suggestions to it, and pair that with one or a few authorizers who could approve those changes and make them final. If a change is made that turns out to be incorrect, you can go back through the version history, just as we talked about with cloud spreadsheets, see how the error was introduced, and restore the old correct version. So you can see how these tools can be set up to encourage information sharing while also putting controls in place that keep that information authoritative and trustworthy. Now, keep in mind that moving your data to the cloud will involve some training. So now that documents are located not on your hard drive or not on your local server, but off in the cloud in a data center, the risk of your data falling into the wrong hands expands from just keeping your physical server or physical computer at your desk secure to also managing access to your data in the cloud. And a central element of that is password management. So for example, if you have staff who are not used to using complex passwords, or they have a habit of putting their passwords on a sticky note under their keyboard, then it'll be important to update your training and expectations with your staff to address that. And you also want to be careful about how you share documents. So now it's just a few clicks to share a given spreadsheet or text document with a lot of people, and maybe the wrong people. So that's something that it makes sense to be cautious about and establish policies about when and how sharing occurs. Both Office 365 and Google Workspace offer some administrative controls to prevent sharing outside of the organization, so that may be something. Also, because your data is no longer inside your building, your internet connection becomes much more important because it's the lifeline to your own data. So if you have an internet connection that is slow or unreliable, before you make a transition to the cloud, you'll want to address that. That may mean getting 2 different internet connections for redundancy, so that if one goes down, you can still have connectivity through the other. You may also want to set up a system where you're making backups of some key documents and keeping them on your local computers so that if something does happen and your internet is down for a while, you can use that local copy until you've got connectivity again. Finally, with these platforms, you'll need to be maintaining them administratively. That means checking periodically that only the right people have access to your systems, and that when somebody leaves the organization, you're cutting off access in a timely fashion. So to wrap up, these tools can really transform how you work. To summarize key points, they can free staff from managing servers, software upgrades. They can increase agility by eliminating barriers to collaboration and removing bottlenecks in how critical information flows through your organization. And finally, they can reduce the risk to business continuity from data loss, whether it's due to hardware failures, cyber attacks, or errors. That's it. I hope this has been helpful to you. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you for watching this episode of How To with NADTC. We hope you found this information on adapting online tools for your human services transportation program valuable and practical. Be sure to check out other episodes in this series for other helpful tips.